The power to prosecute a case doesn't just rest with the Crown, it rests with you. They happen to have that job because they were hired to do it. But we have all those rights with full power to do it. And what that means is if I witness a crime and the OPP don't want to help, that's simple. I lay the charge. Now the police say, well, we don't care. That means you got to do all the work. Then I just start subpoenaing all the officers to be witnesses. Use the subpoena to force them to produce their notebooks. I was told by government lawyers I use up more court resources than any other citizen in the province of Ontario. They would have 3, sometimes 4 government lawyers travel from downtown Toronto out to Hick Village, Cayuga. Probably 4,000 people. Nice courthouse, though. And I would find any way I could to adjourn it. They would have all these high-priced lawyers. They'd rent cars, because a lot of them don't even have cars, sit in Cayuga. They have to drive through rush hour traffic in Toronto to get to Cayuga for court time. I only live 10 minutes away. And if we didn't get called up until 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'd ask for an adjournment. They'd have to go back to their office and say, well, we have to go back another day. They know how to use the system against us. We use the system against them. Every rule I forced upon them. If they're required to serve me a document 20 days before court and they hand it to me when I walk in, guess what? I'm asking for adjournment. And there's no judge who's going to force me to go to trial because I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what the rules are. So they have a duty to obey the rules. And you have far more leeway in a court. If you're charged with offense in Canada and you're self-represented, do you know that judge has to give you advice on what your options are throughout the entire case? I remember once I subpoenaed an OPP officer. He refused to show up. Tried to say, he was out of the country. Okay, it was on December 24th, 2006, but heck, I was in court. You had to be there too. So he's out of the country, obviously on Christmas vacation. So the Justice of Peace tells me, well, just ask for your next witness. I didn't know what the rules were. It was actually the first time I was ever in court. Then about a month later, I lose the case. A month later, I realized, heck, I could have asked a bench warrant for the officer. I could have asked the judge to order a cop to leave the courtroom at that moment of time, find the officer, put him under arrest, and compel him to come back to the court. Doesn't mean the judge would have done it, but I had a right to ask for it. So I appealed to Superior Court. The Superior Court judge was not a happy camper. He was angry at the Crown for allowing the officer to, because officers are supposed to be officers of the court as well, to disobey a subpoena. And he wasn't happy that the JP just moved on. The JP can't tell me what to do, but he must tell me, here are my options. Because why? I'm not a lawyer. That's the way it works. And if they fail to do that, I guarantee you have an automatic right of appeal. The other thing we started doing in Caledonia, because if you go to Caledonia now, it's a peaceful place. I'm serious about that. There hasn't been an occupation in Caledonia for 5 years. Okay? Last year, Commissioner Chris Lewis, the first 5 months of the year, said there was 160 occupations in Ontario, but not in Caledonia. Hadn't been one in 5 years. Why? Simple. We arrest them. We don't wait for the OPP. The other thing you have to understand is not only do you have the power to lay a criminal charge and do private prosecution, but you have full authority to do citizen's arrest. In actual fact, that same law review report said quite clearly that technically, police officer has no more authority to arrest than an average citizen based on common law. And so it's a simple process now. I turn to the officer, are you going to do anything? No, I can't do anything. Okay, that's fine, I'll arrest them for you. Once you arrest the person, that arrest is binding. No officer can overturn that arrest. They may have the discretion not to lay a charge. They have no discretion not the process of citizen's arrest. The court may throw out the charge, but the officer can't. So I just tell the officer, look, you can use your discretion, but once I step in, there's no longer discretion. So I'll give you an example when I first used this. Harper changed the laws July 2012 as a result of the that Oriental shopkeeper in Toronto who met a citizen arrest hours after he was someone robbed him, shoplift. And under the criminal code, you can only do a citizen's arrest either to prevent an offense or in the middle of an offense. You cannot actually track down somebody under the criminal code and actually arrest them. So that's why he was charged with, I think, assault and kidnapping. I believe the charges were. So Harper changed the laws as a result of that particular case. He didn't change the power to arrest. We already had that. What he did is he changed the laws to ensure the police couldn't turn around and charge you if they didn't like the fact that you arrested somebody. So there's now a series of defenses in the criminal code that if the police try to charge you after you arrest somebody, you can appeal to the various defenses to make sure the case doesn't go any further. The power to do citizen's arrest has already been there. Always been there. It's straightforward, it's simple. And I'll give you, when I first learned about this, it was a case in Toronto, at the Toronto airport. And the taxi driver kept coming into one of these no-stopping zones. He kept stopping and trying to pick up a fare and quickly get out before someone told him to move his car. The security guard kept telling him to move his car. So the taxi driver would go and drive around the block, wait for the security guard to walk away a bit, and then drive back to the exact same spot and try to pick up a fare. This went on for a couple of days. And finally one day, the security guard thought, oh, I've had enough of this. And the taxi driver got out to pick up the fare, and he touched him. You're under arrest for trespassing. That's all it takes. A touch, you're under arrest for trespassing. You got to state the charge, you got to physically touch. Okay? Police do the same thing. They'll generally touch your hand, or if they're trying to use force, they'll put you in handcuffs. Right? I've been there. I've done this many times. So the security guard did that. Well, the taxi driver wasn't too happy, so he pushed him away, got in his taxi, and drove off. It went all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. Now, trespassing, if it's your first offense, it's probably going to be a $200 ticket. But by the time he got to the Supreme Court of Canada, he was charged with assault resisting arrest and escaping custody. Okay? He did prison time. Why? Because a citizen's arrest is the same as an officer arresting someone. And if that person resists, it's resisting arrest. If that person flees, it's escaping custody. It's no different than breaking out from a jail. And it's absolute authority. And I'll give you my perfect example of this one. A week after Harper changed the law, I was in Caledonia. We arrived, did one of our typical, we're going to walk down the road. And there had to be 24 officers and 3 natives. That was the typical setting in the last few years. So the native shows up with a cross stick. Right? He starts waving it at my head. He's not going to touch me, but he thinks he's being smart and I'm not assaulting you, but really I'm threatening you, right? The officer's 5 feet away. So I turned to the officer and said, what are you going to do? And the officer said, well, Gary, I told you we can't protect you today. I'm thinking, there's 20 of you, there's 3 natives. What do you mean you can't protect me today? Right? So I said, that's fine. So the guy waves at my head again. He doesn't touch me. I reach out, touch him on the shoulder. You're under arrest for assault. You do not have to make physical contact for an assault. Okay? That native now was convicted in court. But now the OPP are shocked. It was the first time I did a citizen arrest. What are they going to do? Another native comes over and starts hitting me with his bicycle. Right? Trying to, interfere. So I'm asking the cop, what are you going to do about this guy? Because now we're talking about another assault, aiding an escape of custody, right? So the officer said, we're not going to do anything. So I put that guy under arrest, touched him again, and I walked over to the officer. The native guy followed me. So I just kept walking, looked behind, got right to the officer, and said, okay, I've now delivered them to you. I didn't have to use any more reasonable force than just walking over to the police. He followed me. The officer released them. Well, I didn't witness the crime, he says. Well, that's the point of citizen's arrest. You don't have to witness the crime. I mean, you know, we don't need citizen's arrest if the police are there to witness the crime, right? So he released them. So the native guy, I mean, everyone's listening to what's going on. He goes and grabs a baseball bat. Comes back. Well, what do you think the OPP do? Any guesses? They put handcuffs on me and take me to jail to prevent a breach of the peace. Because obviously there's now going to be violence. Not that there wasn't already violence, but now I'm sitting in jail with handcuffs. You can't be charged to prevent a breach. It's one of those catch-all phrases. You're not charged with anything, but they can hold you in jail for several hours, right? And then release you. And then you're saying, well, you know, now the breach is over. So anyway, they bring in these detectives and say to me, well, we hear you want to lay charges. I said, yes. So they get the camera going. I said, I want that officer arrested for aiding an escape of custody. And they said to me, well, we don't do that here. And I said, okay, take the handcuffs off. I'll go find them and arrest them and bring them back for you. And no lie, first time in 6 years, we had the head of detectives walk in. We will swear out these warrants tonight. We'll have those natives arrested. I said, I didn't actually arrest any of the natives. As far as I'm concerned, they're both escape custody right now. They're already under arrest. I'm talking about the officer, right? So by the next morning, they had already arrested the natives, right? Already gotten bail conditions on them. We have never been able to get the police to move so quickly. Now, when I'm in Caledonia, not only do the natives not want to come close to me, but the police make sure that the natives don't come close to me either. It's hard to do citizen's arrest if you're not in arm's length. But I'll give you another story of how this works. There was a guy up in Midland. The OPP had been at his house 300 times in 2 years. That's their own testimony in court. The guy had the various businesses in the area. Actually, the ruling was read out today about the Roundtree ruling. It happened in Palm Beach. What happened is the government tried to seize land on the water's edge of all the property in Palm Beach. The response of one of the business property owners is, you know, piss off, I'm building a fence. He only built it for 30 feet. Then the local bar set it on fire. So his response is, I'm going to build it 60 feet. Well, the response was, well, we're coming over with chainsaws, we're cutting it all down. So his response was, I'm building it 100 feet. Their response was, now we're going to come in backhoes and dig up your entire backyard. This is the way it went. OPP refused to lay any charges. Okay, this is the way policing is done in Ontario. So anyways, it's kept going on, and finally the guy phones me up and says, can you do anything about this? I said, sure. I went up and started looking around to see what was going on. We videotaped a couple of quick things. And then I'm sitting back at home in Hamilton area, Benbrook, and Midland is 3 hours from my place. So I pick up the phone, I phone up the lawyer for the OPP, and I said, I'm leaving my home right now, I'm going up and I'm putting the bar owner under arrest for this charge. Bye, hang on. By the time I got to Midland, 5 cop cars had already been to the bar and dealt with the issue. The guy has had no problem since, right? There was an occupation in Hamilton at the number 9 pipeline at Enbridge in Ancaster. The company went and got an injunction. Hamilton police refused to enforce the injunction, allowed the protesters, union workers, and a few Aboriginals. And so I wrote the chief of police a letter. I live in Hamilton, so I wrote him a letter and said, here's what I'm going to do. You got 24 hours to move them out, or I'm showing up and I'm arresting them. And if your officers interfere, I'm arresting them too. The police moved them out within 24 hours. The media reported that the police only did it because of us. Police do not want to be shamed into doing their job. If there's a trespasser on your property and you've asked them to leave, You don't have to phone 911. Maybe you should. But if you got the cameras running, and I would only do it if the cameras were running, put them under arrest. If the police interfere, put them under arrest. We don't have to tolerate that. These are our rights. This is our property, our rights. The fact that over the last 100 years, we have advocated our rights to paid employees of the government, both in police officers to arrest people and in the doing prosecution, does not mean that we don't have the rights. As I said, I went all the way up to the Court of Appeal. The courts have all agreed with what I'm saying. People have been convicted on me doing the arrest. We had a big ruling come down in October. 2 rulings came down in October. First was, what the government started doing is, instead of arresting me and then spending all the money in court, because I love going to court and arguing, is they'd arrest everybody around me, forcing everyone to have legal fees. So I would stand up and represent them. Well, then the government went nuts. You can't represent people. You're not a lawyer, not a paralegal. Last 5 years, we've had 15 people prosecuted by the government. I represent every single one of those people. Not one case made it to trial. So we would have the Crown stand and say, we're going to call the police on you. Right in court, they'd say that. You're violating the law. Then finally, we were before a judge, and he stood up and he said, I want everybody to know that when I was a lawyer in 1999, I represented the Law Society to stop people like Gary McHale from speaking in court. He pointed right at me. And he paused. I'm thinking, oh, got to buy his judge here. He goes, I lost that case at the Court of Appeal. That ruling is binding on me today. And he turned to the Crown and he said, I know how you've been treating them in other courtrooms. I pulled the files. You better have a better argument than I do. I did. Because I lost. He allowed the Crown to present their arguments on October 16th of last year, and he ruled against them. The Law Society Act does not apply in many, many cases that everyone assumed it did. And that is what the Court of Appeal has ruled. So I won't get into all those details at the moment, but the 2 most important things, what changed Caledonia from being this violent place to where nobody does an occupation. Nobody. They go everywhere else. Brantford is 15 minutes from Caledonia. There's probably $4 billion of construction sites being occupied at this moment in time. Shut down. Not in Caledonia. Not in Caledonia. The difference was we asked the police, and then when I learned, I don't have to ask you anymore. Now it's easy. Now I can pick up the phone and make a phone call. I remember once a Native woman threatened my wife at the courthouse. And, of the scope of things that were going on, it really wasn't a big deal. But the point is, you can't threaten people, especially not at a courthouse, especially when we were the witnesses at the court. So, I mean, it's interfering with the court procedure. So I sent an email off to the police. Said, you've crossed the line. Like you had 20 officers in that one courtroom. Imagine that. For one reason only. Because I was a witness. That's why they were there. Okay? And you could not protect me and my wife. We were harassed in the parking lot. We were harassed in the hallways. And all the OPP did, it was videotape the harassment in a courtroom. So I said to the officer, next time, I'm just arresting everybody. That's it. Not happening again. They're not threatening my wife and getting away with it. She gets a phone call the next day. Why don't you come and make a statement? They arrested the woman, prosecutor, and she pleaded to a peace bond, which is about the best you're going to get on, you say, she said kind of case. But in the middle of the courtroom, you would have union people swearing at the judge, yelling at them, and I said to the sergeant standing beside me, what are you going to do about this? Well, I can't do anything. Okay, that's fine. As soon as the judge leaves the room, I'm going to go arrest him. This is what I said to the guy, the sergeant. I'm not lying. By the time the judge walked out of the courtroom, I'm not going to do it when the judge is there. It's his courtroom at that moment. I stood up. The cops swarmed them. They would have never have done it. These are the same cops who would let people hold knives to the throat an ATF agent. Why are they suddenly enforcing the law? Because I've not given them a choice. If you don't do it, I do it. And if you interfere with me, I'll arrest you too. Now, there's a catch to all this. The catch is, you better know what the law says. If you put your hand on someone to arrest them, and you're wrong about the charge, well, you've committed an assault. So if you're going to do this, you better know what the laws say, what your rights are. You got to be prepared. We heard this already. You got to be prepared. The answer all the time is be prepared. But once the police know that you're serious, then they're going to be serious. Once they know that you're going to ask them politely, always be polite, but you have your own options. I can lay charges, or I can just simply do the arrest. It changes the mood completely. Because no government official cares one iota if you sue them. Nobody. They get taxpayers' lawyers, and if they lose, it's taxpayers' money. But a criminal charge is against the person, not against the department. And even though the government will step in and stay all charges, because they've done in every case that we've done, that's not the point. The point is an independent judge looked at the evidence and laid the charge. Second point is that officer, think about it, your career is going in and giving testimony. Now you've been faced, like Chris Lewis, charged with obstructing justice. Imagine him being a witness in a courthouse. Any defense lawyer would say, have you ever been charged? He has to tell the truth. Yes, I've been criminally charged. And what was the charge? Obstructing justice. Well, it goes a long way to your credibility. Imagine government lawyers. We had a meeting at the Attorney General's office. They wanted some documents I had, and I said, I'll give them back to you as long as we have a meeting. So I met with some of the highest lawyers in the government, and they said, ask me, what do you want in the end if you get your way? And I said, it's simple. I want you guys in jail.